to Carson. This is where I grew up. It was a wonderful place to grow up. A small town in the 50s. Innocence. We could bike all over. We could explore. Everybody looked out for everybody else. But like most farm towns, the town isn't what it used to be. I mean, the storefronts are closed. All of this used to be a wonderful shoe store and a home bakery and a clothing store, and now it's all closed.
Yeah, well, explain the Luthels right here.
Well, the Luthels brothers.
Apparently that began in 1865.
Yeah. Luthel brothers started, bought evidently the store or had it made, and they had a wonderful clothing store and a shoe store. All the really good brands, really good brands. It wasn't. That's where I did a lot of my shopping for school.
Well, a lot of people from all around the area came to here.
Exactly.
And by the way, we should say Carson is in southern Minnesota, about 14 miles from
13.
Rochester, 13 miles from Rochester, and this is where she grew up. So, welcome to our little vlog series of Mom growing up in small town America. Right?
I hope it'll be interesting.
Yeah.
To you. What we're
At
going
least
to
for
do.
the grandkids, right?
Yeah.
All right, go on.
A lot of things have closed up, but it's gotten bigger because it's a bedroom town from Rochester. Bedroom community from Rochester, which of course is the Mayo Clinic and St. Mary's and Methodist Hospital and a lot of people. So it's 5,000 people here. When I was a kid, when I was born, it was 1,100 and went up to 1,300 in the mid-50s.
What you're saying is it was a thriving community back
Very
in
much.
the day. A lot of the people from around the whole area would come here and do their shopping, and there was
Friday
restaurants and bakeries and the movie theater. So why is it not so thriving now? It's because a lot of the big box stores in the bigger towns and the bigger cities around, they kind of suck the life out of these small towns. And it's happened all across America. And
the memories here are great, and we are going to introduce you to a few, and I hope you'll be entertained by them. Used to be an entrance, I believe, my memory is correct, that you'd walk down to the basement, and that's where Dr. Afelt, our town doctor, had his offices, and in the back, not his surgery, but where he would do small surgeries and medicines and all that. He was well known, and I will talk later about polio, but I'll just add one thing, that when it was suspected that I did have it, Dr. Afelt came over because our house was just on the other side of the alley here. And he ran over and he looked at me and he says, I think that she has polio. Let's take her to St. Mary's, which is in Rochester. He always wore a white coat and a tie, or a white shirt and a tie and suit pants, but he smoked all the time. His hands were brown, that yellow brown from cigarettes, and so was his white mustache. But he was a nice, gentle, loving country doctor, small town doctor. He would go out in the middle of the night. I mean, that's what he did. People called, he went to take care of them. House calls. And I in some research, I have found that in the Mayo Clinic, doctors thought a lot of him. Thought he was a very, very smart man, very good doctor. And he doctored all of us for all those years. This is where we got a lot of our clothes, which I said earlier. But one thing in a small town, people knew who you were. And they knew I didn't steal. They knew I wouldn't. So I could go in the store, I could go in the jewelry areas and pull out drawers, I could look at stuff. Nobody looked at me askance because they knew that I didn't do anything like that. Around this area, I can't distinguish exactly where anymore. Here, there, that burned down, but was a store called the Home Bakery. And we would go through the back to come out in front, vice versa, because we lived square in the back of this thing. But it's where we all went. It had an old-fashioned long counter on the west side of the room, and then in the middle of that big room were tables and chairs, and then the other side were booths. And in the front here was where they would sell their bakery goods, and the very back is where they were made. And so we would come here, and this is where we spend 5 cents on an ice cream cone. We had cherry cokes, we'd have french fries, but I didn't always spend my money on the french fries because I always saved my money for books and for going to the thrift shop. I wanted that money to be able to buy treasures. So we spent many, many hours here. We knew the waitresses. One was a neighbor. Another gal we met, she was an older gal, but she befriended us. Her husband was a trucker and gone most of the time. We just enjoyed coming here. My Aunt Elma and I would come here. She loved it because she loved the baked goods. And she and I would spend a lot of time just talking in the booth. So Elma lived with Mom and I, and Dad and Mick at that time. She took care of Mick and I when we were younger, when Mom worked. Mom and Mick and I would come here, and for 10 cents we'd get the most wonderful malts, very malty, and they were so good. And it was an old-fashioned one. It had, again, a long bar with beautiful, beautiful mirrors, full mirrors behind that. That left, and they turned it into a drugstore where you get your prescriptions. It's been a video store, and now it's where the town paper landed. Mm-hmm. I spent a lot of time in the town library. I think I read everything, the Bobs. And I can't think of any more, Kale. Here we're at the variety store. It's a place that my brother and I came to quite often when we were kids. We'd get a quarter for allowance at first when we were really little, and we'd come here and he would spend it and I would spend it too, usually on penny candy. And that's introduction.
We'd be introducing.
And my daughter.
Yeah, I have a lot of memories here. Everything that she's talking about, I have in equal amount of memories because I used to spend 3 weeks per summer down here. And one of my best childhood friends lived right next door to my grandma and grandpa. So I also have just a whole childhood of memories here. And I remember coming in the same store. Yeah. We used to put our little hands out, and my grandma, grandpa, and my great aunt Elma used to give us a nickel or a quarter, and we used to come. I used to go swimming up there at the pool every night, and then we would come home and shower and then eat dinner, and then we would get money to come up here and buy some candy. So yeah, I love this place.
When I was younger, probably 8 years old or so, one of the gals that worked here was Mrs. Jensen. She was fairly short, big brown eyes, dark hair, and we cultivated an unusual relationship. I really cared for her. She really cared for me. Only time I ever saw her was when I came to the variety store to buy candy. But I ended up, over all those years when I grew up, she was so close to my heart that I invited her to be a coffee server at my wedding. Now, coffee servers then, that many years ago, 56 years ago, that's an important job. You gave that to somebody you thought a lot of. My husband's grandmother and Mrs. Jensen. But when I was younger, still, I would bring her flowers all summer long. As soon as the flowers started coming out, I would get lilacs and I would get lilies of the valley. So I'd bring these bouquets to the variety store and give them to her. So she meant a lot to me.
So my friend who lived next door to my grandparents and I, when we were like 8 years old, we decided that we were going to pick some tiger lilies from the neighbor and the other neighbor. And then we brought them over here to Main Street, and we just walked up and down Main Street, and we sold them to elderly gentlemen for a dime each in order to come here and buy some more candy. And when my grandma found out about that, she was livid because we stole flowers from the neighbor, and we had to do chores around the house and make money back from grandma. We had to go give the money back to the lady that owned the flowers.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because she was not going to have any of that, having her grandkid come down and steal flowers.
Right.
But we thought it was just a great idea.
Yeah, you did at that age.
Yeah, and maybe I even bought a dolly here because sometimes I didn't always buy a candy. Sometimes a little plastic cheapo doll.
Yeah.
But whatever. But I learned a life lesson from grandma.
Yep. I did too. Many of them.
Look at the pretty wildflowers. Are you doing this now? All right, Mom, here we are.
Well, welcome to Carson Creek. That's what I've always called it, but I think it's Marson Creek, if I remember, somebody told me recently. Up in the other end, we would bring our hammers and nails, and we'd go to the lumberyard and get old stuff that they didn't want, and we built forts down there. We went hunting for tadpoles. We'd bring our jars down. And crayfish, there's crayfish. We'd have to go underneath the rocks to find them. One time, I was about a block down that way, and my friend's dad had a gas station on the corner, and we had ridden our bikes here. Anyway, we were doing the crayfish business, and a big gash in my foot. and it was bleeding like mad. So I rode behind her on her bike. She was strong. She pedaled both of us up to her dad's. Her dad put a pail of water in the back of his old car. I put my foot in it, and he took me home. So it was a place to go. We'd a summer day, a beautiful summer day. We'd say, anybody wants to go to the creek? Off we'd go. A whole bunch of us would go down there. Usually about our age, some a little younger, some a little older. It was my place of refuge. It was peaceful. I loved it. I loved everything about the creek. And
so back in the day when you could just get on your bike and you could go down here for hours,
yes,
and then
all
just
day.
go home.
Yeah, if we went in the morning, we had to go home for lunch. If we went afterwards, we had to go home for supper.
Okay.
Because we had, I think it was a 5:30. I might be wrong, but a 5:30 bell in town that the whole town could hear when it rang. It was time for supper. So it was lovely to be able to do that for little kids, and we weren't all that old to get on our bikes and head off for adventure. Backed up about 5 feet, we'd be standing in the front of the house I grew up in. But the telephone company bought the land. Yeah, so there was a centennial, and the city wanted to see, they had an idea, but they wanted to see the deed for the house, see if it was the oldest one.
Oldest one meaning when Mr. Carson came in and founded the town in 1865. And the centennial in 1965, they wanted to, there was going to be a big town celebration.
It was huge.
And they wanted to give my grandma and grandpa the attention that this was Mr. Casson's house, and grandma
wouldn't let them
let them know.
She didn't want the attention, thank you.
No.
Wouldn't let them look at the will.
Or the deed.
The deed.
Yeah, they wanted to look at the deed because they were curious, the town, who was in charge.
Who knows?
Yeah, whatever. But anyway, they wanted to look at the deed, and grandma's like, nope. What they did was they picked a house up here, just a few houses up, and it was an old Victorian house.
It was Dr. Afeld's house.
That was Dr. Afeld's house.
Yeah, I think he was the second owner. Yeah.
Okay. And so they gave that house the recognition of being the oldest house
They
in
got
town.
attention because it would have been in the papers. It would have been probably announced at different events that this was the oldest. But Mom didn't. She was shy in that way. She didn't want any eyes looking at her necessarily.
Right.
So that was
Like
fine.
after the war, they bought this house, and it was pretty dilapidated.
Probably.
And then they fixed it up.
Yeah. Yep. So it was a good place to live. Again, it wasn't fancy outside or inside, but this is where everybody wanted to come. They wanted to spend time at this house because Mom and Dad welcomed them, and there was a lot of laughter in this house, so there was always kids around the table, and that was Mom's gift.
Yeah, and she made it very, very inviting for her grandkids
Yes.
because
Yeah.
we had a blast down here.
Yeah, she loved kids, and she knew how to treat kids. So they had respect for themselves.
Yeah,
And
she treated us like people, like from the get-go, not like little kids to be, dealing with, but like seriously people
exactly.
that we could be friends and
that's how we were raised.
yeah. And so when she died, consequently, I lost my second mother and one of my best friends. So she was 91.
Yep.
Yeah, 91. So we had a lot of good memories.
And I always say that's the best inheritance you can give a child is a happy home, laughter, unconditional love. It all goes together. And that gives them confidence in the world when they have to go out and face it.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring you around the neighborhood a little bit. This white house on the corner, there was 2 kids that were there. So one winter, he rolls up this huge snowball, cracks it over my head. What? So the next year he asked me to prom. And I said,
For you.
I said, no. No.
Ooh, cool car.
So the light gray building in the background here, and in this parking lot over here, that's when my dad worked for quite a few years. It was a dairy, which meant that they brought in milk from the farmers and they bottled it, and that was part of Dad's work. Lifting the cases and working in there. And Mick and I would go over there every so often, and there was always Cheerios in the freezer.
Oh, explain Cheerios.
Cheerios were a little ice cream with chocolate coated on a stick. And so every time we went over there, which we tried to go quite often, we got one of those as a treat. So then Dad, from there, he went to Marigold Dairies down in Rochester, which was probably the dairy in the whole area. And that's where all the farmers brought their milk, or the milk was delivered, and they did everything with it. You'd walk up those same stairs I just talked about, but then you'd hop over this little kind of fence, and that's where Hermie lived. Hermie was one of the characters in town. He was a gentle, quiet man, and we would, every so often when we had decided we had anything else to do, we'd climb those stairs and we'd hop over the little fence and we'd knock on the door, and Hermie would come to the door. I don't know if he worked. I don't know anything about his history because we're kids. We never asked, of course. But he would invite us in and he would give us lemonade and cookies. And we sit down and talk to him for a while, chew the fat, and then we were done, and he'd thank him for the cookies, and off we'd go doing something else. Same stairs and down the walkway and into the hall. That's where Bummy lived. Well, actually, Boomgardner was his last name. And he made popcorn. I don't know if he did anything else. Every Friday night, when it was the time, all the stores were open on Friday night, and all the farmers would come in and they would get groceries, or they would socialize because the cars were parked one right after another. And he was out in front of the home bakery making his popcorn. He had a little popcorn stand, and he popped it, and it was the best popcorn I've ever tasted in my life. Erdman's grocery store, it's one of the biggest in this whole area, and many people from all different towns come here to get their groceries. Also Rochester, but a lot of people come here. But they used to be in the middle of this alley. There used to be the Erdman's grocery store, but in the back of the grocery store, which would be this side of the alley, was the butchering area. Now the farmers would bring in a cow or whatever to be butchered, and every so often, if we were out about at that right time, we'd hear "cow loose," and our ears appeared, "cow loose," and off we could hear it, clump, click, clump, click, clump, click, clump, click, clump, down the alley. It was probably scared to death trying to get away. And then they would be chasing it because they'd want to get it before it got out into traffic or anything. And so us kids would be chasing it too.
So here we're in front of Pack Rat Annie's spot.
Well, we think it is. It was one of these places. Pack Rat Annie was a little old lady. She was quite frail looking, gray hair, wear all frumpy clothes, and she pulled behind her once red wagon.
Mm-hmm.
But her job in life was to go through people's garbage. That's what she did. And we all knew her, and we all let her because it was a small town, and not everything was worth calling the cops on or whatever, you know? So anyway, we all knew Pack Rat Annie, and they always made names for people. Anyway.
Sounds about right.
Yes, they did.
Okay.
Anyway, I watched her many times go through our garbage in the front. You had one time, us little rascals.
And how old were you? Like under 10?
Nope.
Older 10?
Oh, probably about 10.
10, yeah.
10 or 11. My neighbor friends and I decided, well, where does she go? And we found out, kind of followed her where she went, the door she went into. We thought, well, wouldn't it be nice to go see where she lives and what she's doing in there or whatever?
Yeah, because kids are curious.
Yeah. So we got little tablets of paper and pencils. And full of guts, we knocked on the door and said we're reporters for the Carson newspaper.
Yeah, hello, we're the Carson reporters.
Well, she looked pretty small for reporters, but she didn't say that. We're just doing a personal interest stories.
Human interest story on you this week.
Yeah.
We just want to get into your house and check it out. So would you ask her?
Could we come in?
Can we come in and say hello?
Yeah. And she did. She opened that door for us graciously as could be. What a sweetheart.
Yeah.
These little twerpy kids.
Yeah.
So we went in, and it was like Aladdin's cave. You know, she'd been digging through garbage for decades, and things that people didn't want, maybe a piece of silver or a piece of glassware or whatever. She collected all that. And the walls, you couldn't see the walls. It was piled with all this wondrous stuff.
Like what? What was there?
Silver and china and glassware and probably because people get tired of things. She showed us around, and I think she was pleased that we had some interest in her. I don't know what was running through her mind.
She was playing your game. Oh, okay, Carson reporters.
Yeah, I don't know what's going through her mind, but I know what's going through my mind. Wow.
Yeah.
This place is amazing.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a treasure trove to go check out.
Okay, this used to be Fred's feed store. and the building on the corner. It was a great building. And in the front was a small office, and then you went through doors, and then the back was where he had, all the way to the ceiling, he had, most of the ceilings, he had bags of feed and seed and fertilizer, whatever for animals. But us kids loved that place. So if one was kind of talking to him, the others would sneak in the back. And we would climb up and hide. I mean, some of those all the way to the ceiling. When we climbed, and we climbed all over, and we jumped, and oh my goodness, we could have wrecked everything for him. No matter, no wonder.
Got seriously hurt.
And no wonder he came out and say, when he heard us, laughing or giggling in there, when he heard, he said, "You kids get out of here!"
I'm sure.
And so then we would come down sheepishly, like, oh, I don't know how we ended up here.
What's going on?
How did we ever get here? And we go out until the next time.
Yeah, exactly.